All right, now joining us on Tennis Channel Inside In, joined by one of the favorite guests I get to talk to every so often, Brad Stine, coach of several great players. He's worked with Jim Courier, Sebastian Grosjean, Kevin Anderson, and now Tommy Paul the last couple years. Been involved in pro tennis for more decades than I can actually recall, but he's been around a while. A tennis lifer. Brad, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, man. It's always nice to be on. It's been a while.
It has been a while. A lot's been going on in your coaching world and the world of tennis in general. I guess the first thing starting out is how's the, we're doing this at the end of the year, which is good. So how's the year in retrospect been? I know the grind of a pro season's been good, but have you had a chance to reflect on 2024 and the goals and the titles and what you and Tommy were able to accomplish this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the most satisfying thing for me, and Tommy and I talked about this just in the last couple of weeks, is just the fact that Tommy's gotten better every single year. Every year that we've had has been quote unquote his best year of his career, and this year is no different from that. He won 3 titles, which was really big. That was one thing going into this year from last year, because last year he didn't win any titles, and so that was one of the things that we were definitely trying to focus on a little bit more, was actually like closing tournaments out and being able to actually win some titles, which was nice because he got that early on with Dallas, and then went back-to-back finals also, which was good. And then, won Queens and won Stockholm, which was funny because the Stockholm tournament, is played at what's called the Kings Club. So he won the Queens Club tournament and the Kings Club tournament. So those were really good. And it was the last few weeks of this last trip was a little bit rough. Tommy got food poisoning in Vienna before he played Brandon Nakashima, and was, I don't know how he made it through that match. Actually finished the match. He was doubled over a few times in the match. I thought he was going to throw up on the court or something, and then Paris just didn't play particularly well, and came up against a very inspired Adrian Manarino, playing in front of his home crowd, and he played extremely well. And, that put us in a little bit of a tough pickle from the standpoint of, our goal for the end of the year was to try and finish top 10. And Tommy's going to finish the year 12, I believe, which was, we were kind of joking around because I was not going to be very happy if he finished 13, because he finished 13 last year. And, I said, I just want a little bit of improvement. If we finish 12, we at least, we're a spot higher than we were last year again. Yeah. But it was funny because we were talking about how, last year he didn't win a title. This year he wins 3 titles, and he was potentially going to finish at the same ranking, which was kind of strange, but I think to sit down and discount those last couple of weeks which were a little bit disappointing. But if you take the year as a whole, I would say we're pretty satisfied, pretty happy with where we're at.
You said a few things in there I wanted to touch on. I guess the first being playing in Paris at that Bercy tournament. I know it didn't go your way, but against a local player. Is there anything like that? I mean, it's like a true road game in tennis. So use other sports.
The Bercy crowd is rough. Like they are rough. It's not like the Roland Garros crowd. It's not like, I don't think you can even, they're a whole nother animal. We know they're primarily French, but I'm not sure where they come from, because they're not like the French crowds that you see at other French tournaments or at Roland Garros. There was a little incident this week in Metz, so maybe some of the people from Bercy went to Metz. I don't know. But Tommy's had, as rough as it was against Adrian, last year he played Gasquet in Paris, and that crowd was out of control. Cheering after first serves missed, cheering after every error that you make, calling out in the middle of ball tosses, calling out in the middle of points. This year they had a guy or two that actually had a drum that were stirring the crowd up with the drum and drumming and everything. And it's a wild scene when you play a French guy at that tournament.
Is there ways to practice? It's a unique situation, but is that something you're working on, or you're talking to Tommy about, like staying focused and maybe just not getting caught up in it?
Yeah, it's, as you go into the match, obviously you talk about the fact that it's going to be like that. You're going to have to deal with that. I think he's done a really good job overall with the crowd. he, last year, I think last year against Gasquet, it was probably 20% worse than it was against Manarino this year. And I thought Tommy won that match 7-6 in the third against Gasquet. And afterwards, he was asked a little bit about the crowd, and I thought he had an extremely intelligent and mature answer. He said, if I'm playing a tournament in the U.S. and I have a crowd like that, I'm super happy about it. So can't really fault him for supporting
Mm-hmm.
him.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, I do remember that match being epic. And the other thing you said, Brad, was about the ranking. And it's been brought up too. It's, Alexander Zverev wins Paris. He gets to number 2. It's looked at by skeptics like, okay, Alcaraz won 2 slams. He's number 3. So the way the rankings are structured, and I bring this up because you mentioned it, Tommy Paul won 3 tournaments and is only 1 spot ahead. Do you think that it's a finite system? Do you put a lot of stock into how the rankings are formulated, or do you think it could be improved in any way?
I mean, I think that it's something that you can definitely look at. At this point right now, I've felt for quite a long time that it's been relatively fair with the slams.
Mm-hmm.
Winner of the slams gets 2,000 points. Winners of a Masters 1,000, 1,000 points. So half as much for a Masters 1,000. I mean, I think the slams have to be weighted more. If you go all the way back to when, like you said, I've been on the tour for a few decades. Back in the olden days in the 1990s, when I was working with Courier, Jim was playing in Tokyo, and we knew on that day, regardless of what he did, he was going to lose the number 1 ranking in the world. And he had 2 slam titles, and Pete Sampras at that time had none. And so that was a big question mark. And Jim actually had meetings after that with the president of the ATP at that time, Mark Miles, and to discuss the ranking system, because back then the slams weren't weighted that much more than the 1000s. Back then they were called Super Nines.
Yeah.
And so he, I mean, a pretty unfair situation. Jim might have lost the number 1 ranking at some point to Pete anyway. I'm sure he probably would have. But it shouldn't have been right then. Shouldn't have been at that point. He should have had X number of weeks, more on his record as the number 1 player in the world. But the ranking system back then was a little bit skewed, and they made that change. And I think that change from back then is basically what we've been playing with now for a long time.
Yeah, you want to, it's not perfect. There's definitely been progress. Obviously, you want to value consistency, but it's also fair to say you'd rather have the year that ends with the titles and the bigger ones, even if it's not
exactly.
as quote unquote as consistent. And another thing you said too, getting 3 titles, but getting that first one in Dallas. I know it was, the 250 event in Dallas will be at 500 next year. But what, if anything, do you get out of winning a title early? Does that alleviate any pressure, even if it's not the biggest one, that you've got one in the bag and you've got something to work with as the season progresses?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely think so. And I think there's definitely something to be said for. Tommy and I've talked about this over the years. That you need to practice winning, if that makes sense.
Right.
For Tommy to have a chance to win bigger titles, to win Masters 1000s, which he hasn't done yet, or to try and go deeper in slams, than he has gone, or to have a chance to win a slam, I think you have to have won titles at the various different levels, and it's each of those is a bit of a stepping stone to getting to the next level. So he's won 2 250s now, and he's won 3 250s now altogether, and a 500, and been in the semis of a couple of Masters 1000s. And, that's the next step, is to be able to close out one of those bigger events. And for me, from a coaching standpoint, and for Tommy, that's a natural progression to having a chance, or feeling like you have a chance to win a bigger and bigger and bigger title. Because once you can't win a Masters 1000 generally without having played at least a couple of guys in the top 10, and you're going to have to have beaten those guys, and you beat them on that stage, so that you can carry that into playing, at one of the slams and meeting them in the later rounds, and feeling like, I've beaten these guys before on a big stage.
Right.
It's not something that's out of the ordinary. So it's very important. Winning titles is such a big deal in my mind.
So 3 titles this year, and, funny talking to somebody who profiled you a few years ago, Joel Drucker, on this show. He referenced the seismic shift in the tennis landscape, right? The big 3 is winding down, if not almost all the way done.
Yeah.
You have these 2 guys right now in Alcaraz and Sinner at the top of the game, but without any lag time, they've just kind of assumed the mantle. And I say this as a veteran on the tour who's been around for several decades. Have you noticed that this is out of the ordinary, or is this just the ebbs and flows of how the tennis landscape and the hierarchy works?
Yeah, I don't think you can. I don't think you can put too much emphasis on the fact that it's panned out the way it has. Um, it's funny because, for example, I said, not that I was a genius at the time or anything, but when Sampras retired, you know, I said in a relatively short period of time to a couple of people, just in talking, that it's going to be kind of sad for Pete in that his records, which are unbelievable records, and at that time were amazing. To have won 14
Mhm.
slams was incredible. But I was like, he's going to get surpassed, and he's going to get
Mhm.
surpassed relatively quickly. He didn't
Mhm.
hold the record for very long, and then all of a
Yeah,
sudden you've got Roger passing him, and then Rafa and Novak, that end up
yeah,
passing him, and it's almost like Pete's an afterthought in a way now. I say that, and he's not. He's one of the greatest players of all time, but he definitely didn't hold that record for very long.
right.
Will Sinner, Carlos, those guys be able to surpass the number of slams that these guys have won, that the big 3 have won? Man, I wouldn't bet a nickel on that. I mean,
Mhm.
there's just it's such a long period of time for them to be able to dominate the game at that level, and win that many titles. Obviously they're.
Yeah.
I think those guys are going to be multiple slam winners. There's no doubt about it. I mean, they already are. Carlos already is.
Mhm.
But are they going to be able to get to the you know
Right.
15 number, to the 20 number, to the 25 number? Um, I wouldn't bet on that. I wouldn't bet on that at all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one thing, right? Even if you take away the tennis skill level that it takes to win and even the competition level, the 2 things you can't really factor on is health and motivation. So
Exactly.
we're talking like another decade of them
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
hopefully as healthy and motivated. It's like good luck, but that just shows you how special that big 3 era was.
Yeah. No, for sure.
So when because I bring up Carlos in particular, because Tommy's had quite a few cracks at him, beaten him a few times, had some tougher losses. The Olympics was a heck of a match, heck of an outing. But when you're coaching someone against the quote unquote best guys, the alphas currently going, what's that experience like? And how's Tommy's motivation to keep getting back up and having a crack at the guys that are the standard right now?
Yeah. I mean, listen, I think both of us love those opportunities. You know, I
Mhm.
love I love game planning for those guys and talking to Tommy about that stuff, and trying to prepare for those matches. And I mean, he loves the challenges of getting an opportunity to play those guys. I think Tommy has a great, healthy perspective on that. He wants to test himself against the best guys, and you know, we'd love it if it was in a round or two later in the tournament sometimes, because he got
Yeah.
Carlos a couple times, but then this year especially, quarters at Wimbledon, and then the Olympics. I mean, those were really big matches, where
Mhm.
Tommy played great for periods of those matches, and looked as good or better than I think anybody on the planet, to be honest. But just wasn't able to sustain it quite as long as those guys were, and and that makes it tough. And that's one of the things that
Yeah.
we're trying to get over the hump with, is him being
Mhm.
able to find his best tennis. If you look at the set and first 3 games or 4 games that he played against Carlos at Wimbledon this year in the quarterfinals, I mean, the tennis in the first set from both guys was just off the charts. Tommy wins that first set and then is up an early break in the
Mhm.
second, and you're feeling like things are phenomenal, and then he just can't quite maintain that level. And
Mhm.
Carlos maintains the level, or he picks it up a little bit, and it's unfortunate, obviously, from our standpoint, that Tommy's not, or hasn't been able to maintain it over the course of time. I feel like, and this, I'm not saying anything shocking here. I don't think that I personally feel like, and I think Tommy feels like, going into the majors, that playing 3 out of 5 sets is an advantage for him against most of the
Mhm.
guys.
Mhm.
but it hasn't been an advantage for him against, those guys. Um,
Yeah, you say yeah. No, it's true, and you say maintaining the level. It also, and I was thinking in the Olympic match, Brad, it just shows you that the margins are so thin, and it really does at the elite level come down to a few points, but the top players maintain their level and seem to have the advantage time and time again. So I mean, it's like on one hand you're not that far off, but on the other hand, it's not a coincidence that the same guys are at the top of the game.
yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it.
I was gonna bring him up too because I had him on the show a few weeks ago, but Medvedev's coach, Jill Savaro, is on here. It's a great chat we had, and he mentioned how like at that level where Daniil is, he's like, I'm constantly scouting Alcaraz and Sinner like throughout the year. Like it's not just the coaches. Do you feel like there's an eye that you have that's kind of on the top players in the game, even when Tommy doesn't line up against them?
Um, I mean, listen, I can't watch a tennis match without being, critical and putting things in the memory banks and paying attention to and being aware of if you see guys are, technically or tactically doing things differently than what you've seen in the past.
Yeah.
You make notations of that for sure going in.
Hmm.
Sometimes I'm a bit of a gym rat. I love watching matches. First thing I do in the morning is turn on Tennis Channel and see what matches are on.
Hmm.
And I just have it going all day a lot of the time and stuff. And
Yeah.
and so it's sometimes it's a little bit of a curse. I try to turn my brain off, my coaching brain off, to just watch the tennis and enjoy the tennis sometimes. But you're always, especially when you're watching the best guys, you're always paying attention to what they're doing, and if there's areas that you see that you feel like you can potentially exploit a little bit.
Certainly do. More here with Brad Stine on Tennis Channel Inside In, talking to coach of several premier players, working with Tommy Paul for the last couple of years as he hits his career high in the best tennis clearly of his career. Getting back to Tommy and some of the stuff that happened this year, Brad, into the top 15, finishing the year at 12, peaked at number 11 for a career high. But, one of the things that we've heard you say, and you've relayed the message from Tommy, is that he's not satisfied, that there's still levels to go. So, on that kind of front of not being satisfied and keeping going, how have you seen the natural progression of just the professional approach of not just being motivated to have a good result, but keep it going into tournament by tournament, week by week, and ultimately year by year?
Yeah, like I said at the start, one of the things that's been great with Tommy is that he's made progress every single year, and his rankings improved every single year that we've been together.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that. I'll take some credit for that, but he deserves a lot of the credit for that as well. And part of that is that I think once he started seeing the success and the expectations that I think had been put on him, from an early period. I think that he ran with that, and he wanted more of that. He wanted more success. I think that if we look back to 2021 when he won his first title in Stockholm, and that was the
Mm-hmm.
very last tournament of the year, that he he came away from that and said, I want more of that. There wasn't a sense of like satisfaction on his part. There was a desire and a commitment to dig even deeper in the off season, push harder. Where can I get better? What can I do better? That's going to give me more opportunities to win more titles like that, because he loved that experience and his first tour title, and he didn't sit on his
Yeah.
laurels in any way,
Mm-hmm.
shape, or form from that. And I think that just pushed him to another level of professionalism. And
Yeah.
I would say that Tommy's extremely professional in his preparation for matches and tournaments and everything now, and he has been, I would say, for the last 3 years or so. Um, we kind of we kind of like sometimes to perpetrate the concept that he's kind of a easy-go-lucky. I don't know if lazy is the right word. I mean, when I first started
No,
with
it's like,
Tommy, when I first started with
yeah,
Tommy,
it's like a sandbag thing.
yeah,
It's
I
like
mean,
it's kind of like a sandbagger
when I
approach
first
for,
started with
he's
him,
a
he
lazy guy. Yeah.
definitely didn't have the reputation of being extremely professional. And even
Yeah.
when we first started, and he was still playing challengers at that point, um, he was being much more professional than what people realized behind the
Hmm.
scenes a little bit. And we literally would joke around about the fact that, like, you know we don't want people to see us working hard. we want to do it like kind of in the background. Now it's not a big secret. I think everyone knows that Tommy works very hard and stuff. But um, so yeah, it's a matter of wanting to keep getting to the next level, and the big thing for him, is win more titles. That's like, those are the stepping stones. Like I said, would be great to win more 500s. Would be great to start winning a few of the 1000s, and win more of those, and then prepare and be as prepared as you can be, and try and make some deep runs and get a little bit of luck and a little bit of skill that comes
Yeah.
together at the slams, and see if you can really do some damage and put yourself in a position, like Fritz did this year. I mean, I think Fritz making the finals at the U.S. Open was something that I think his peers weren't shocked by any means, because I think that we've seen Taylor competing at the top level of the game for a while, but I think it also
Yeah.
definitely motivates Tommy and
Right.
Francis and all the other American guys, that have been around Taylor and know Taylor well, and feel like, especially Tommy and Francis, obviously they're his generation a little bit more, and they've been close. They've both been to semis
Yeah.
of slams, so I think that's a big motivating factor for those guys to look at it and say, hey, we've got a shot.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it's going to be, a stepping stone in just the wave of American tennis. I also, and you can comment on this too, feels like the American men, like when the American men are playing matches even against each other, I feel like the level's gotten substantially better in the last couple of years. Like they are collectively getting better, even if the rankings that we talked about it might not always line up. I think there is a increase in the level of play between those top Americans, Tommy, Taylor, Francis included.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, and they're getting pushed. They're getting pushed
Hmm.
from the younger guys from behind them. I mean, Alex
Hmm.
Mickelson's had a hell of a year, top 50 now. I mean, he's
Hmm.
played really, really well, and is pushing to get better. I think even you look at, obviously not a younger guy, but Marcos Giron has had a great year.
Hmm.
I think that he's pushing the other guys. I think that I see within this group now something that I think we had back in the 90s, which is what I would describe as a healthy sense of competition amongst the American guys. Um, Taylor and Tommy and Francis battling to be and finish number one American. Taylor kind of ran away with it after the U.S. Open after he made the final, but Tommy took that for a couple of weeks this year, and that was kind of a big deal for everybody in their minds. I think
Hmm.
that there's an availability and a possibility of getting to that point. So
Yeah.
I think that it's very healthy with all those guys out there, and I think that they're supportive of each other. But at the
Hmm.
same time, they want to be a little bit better than the other guys around them, than their peers.
Yeah. I was going to ask you too, in regards to certain areas of his game, the ATP's fancy return metric. Good luck figuring out how they cancel it, but
Yeah, no one knows
how they
no one
calculate
knows
it.
exactly what those numbers are, right?
No, yeah, I saw it. He has a rating. Tommy has a rating of 157.2. Is that like a quarterback
I
rating in
have
the
no
NFL?
idea what that means.
But yeah, so it grades him as a very, very elite returner. And the other number is the 33.8% first serves on your return one, which is number one in the
Can we
News League.
translate that to him finishing in the top 10?
Yeah. Well, was return just, is that just more in your coaching experience, natural, his gifts? Are you guys putting more emphasis on returns, or are there other areas where you're really trying to
there
focus at this
it's
level?
funny because you ask about the analytics, and we made a little adjustment. We started
Mhm.
working with an analytics team a little over a year and a half ago about now. And we were getting analytics prior to every single match before, the
Mhm.
basically a breakdown on the other player, on the opponent. And the contract came up, and Tommy and I discussed it, and we felt that although it was nice, we didn't feel that what we were getting from it really had contributed to either winning or losing matches so much. And we both agreed that the main thing that we looked at was serving locations and or serving patterns that you might see
Mm.
from the other players. And so we readjusted what we're doing with the analytics. We're still using the same team. It's a great team. They've
Yeah.
been really, really good with us and stuff. But what we're doing now is we're just getting serving information on the opponents.
Mm.
And then twice a year, we're actually getting a report on Tommy. So we got that mid-year this year, and some of the information in there revolved around returns. It wasn't so much on first serve returns. It was a little bit, but more on second serve returns. And just, giving us some information about, where he could improve, areas that he could get better in.
Yep.
For where he's at right now, the numbers are very marginal. If he can make 2 to 3% more returns in play, I mean, that translates to a huge number from the standpoint of winning. So,
Yeah.
and we've been, it's kind of funny on our team. Everybody I think in the whole tennis world was aware of the Roger Federer speech at Dartmouth this year,
Yep.
and him talking about the fact that he'd won 80% of his matches, but only 54% of the points that he played. And that clicked in my head for some reason, and I started delving into that, and I started doing a little bit of research on all these other players and seeing what their number was, because you can actually look on the ATP WTA app, and at the very bottom it gives you career and individual years, how
Mm-hmm.
many, what percentage of points the players won. And so I looked at Rafa and Novak. Both those guys are at 54%. Which makes sense. Roger was at
Mm-hmm.
54%. Sasha was at 53%. Medvedev was at 53%. And I can't remember who it was, but there was another couple of guys in the top 10 that were at 52%. And Tommy Paul was at 51%. And so I literally talked to our team
1%.
and I said, guys, where do we find 1%? We need to find 1% more. If he's at 52%, it looks like he's probably in the top 10. So we started literally talking about where do we find that 1%? And it with the information, you combine that with the information that we were getting from the analytics, and there were small little things that we were trying to make adjustments in, and find that 1%. And again, it was good enough to win some titles, but we didn't finish top
Yeah.
10.
It's such an interesting thing. It really comes down to 1% can make the difference between just that enormous breakthrough. And having the mind to look at analytics, Brad, but also know that tennis is still a game of feel and strategy out there in your own right. So I'm curious to learn all this stuff and even break news to the coach about player stats too. So
No, I love that one.
no,
That was good.
not that far off, and a few other things. A couple more things with Brad Stine here on Tennis Channel Inside In. I want to ask you as well in terms of Tommy Paul's season and the success at Queen's Club and getting into Wimbledon. Did you have a good indication that his game would succeed on grass? Were you optimistic? And is that a surface, again, the shortest season that could line up with how he plays?
Yeah, the shortest season part really irritates me, especially with losing Newport. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
what's funny is that Tommy. When I started with Tommy, Tommy had been kind of pigeonholed as like an American clay court tennis player. He'd won the French Open in the juniors, and I think there were a number of people, coaches, people within our federation here at the USTA and everything else that looked at Tommy as a guy who was going to be incredibly successful as an American player on clay. And when I started working with him, I told him very, very early on that his best surface and the surface he was going to be most likely to win a slam on would be grass. And he kind of was surprised at that. And I said, Tommy, I'm telling you, your game is going to translate unbelievably well to the grass. And that was prior to, I think it's been relatively documented now, our progression towards him becoming more of an attacking style tennis player.
Hmm.
Um, but that was part of that leading into that. And it's funny that the year, I think it was in towards the end of 2020, which was the COVID year, and or 2021. It was probably 2021 really, where we started making a push from January all the way through that entire year for him to transition more, for him to come forward. We spent a lot of time working on volleys. And if you go back and watch the matches that he played in Stockholm that year when he won Stockholm in 2021, and he beat Fritz and he beat Francis and he beat Shapo in the finals, he beat Andy Murray there. I mean, he was coming in, even Indian Wells that year in 2021, he beat Rublev. and he came in 40 plus times during that match, and so those were the things. And every time we were talking about transition, coming forward, serving and volleying, I was always commenting on, this is something that's going to transition to playing on grass. This
Yeah.
play, this type of approach shot, volley to this position is going to be something that's going to translate really, really well to the grass. So I was really kind of like pushing the grass all the time. And, Tommy had never played a full season of grass until
Oh.
2022. He missed Wimbledon 2021 with a foot injury. And so his first real season on the grass was 2022. And then, winning Queens this year, I think Tommy, since that time, has really, really embraced and really looks forward to the grass court season. And he had a good understanding of the history of the Queens Club tournament and winning an event like that on grass. And so that was something that was really special for him. He knew it was really special for me. I mean, of all the 500s to win, for me, the Queens Club probably was the most significant that you could win. The history of that event,
Yep.
The fact that it is a grass court tournament, that club is a phenomenal club. It's got
Yeah.
amazing history. Was just so much fun for us to go through that event.
Yeah, and it also has the biggest trophy too, so that should probably tell you as
definitely
well.
does
That's
have
like
the biggest trophy. But what's funny? Tommy's won 2 titles, Queens and Stockholm. They both have ginormous perpetual trophies, and give the smallest actual trophy to the player that you've ever seen. They're these tiny little. Stockholm tournament has this little tiny trophy that they give you. That's like a replica of the giant globe that they do.
Yeah, it's getting like an arm workout, lifting it up. It's pretty good. But no, it was very exciting to see. And we talk about all the tennis stuff too, but you've been adamant too that one of the reasons why he's had success and why a lot of the players you've coached have had success too, is finding that work-life balance, is finding an area to unplug and not just be so wound up tight about tennis all the time. We've heard the stories. It's fishing. It's a lot of outdoor stuff for Tommy, but I know that, and you can expand on this too, work-life balance is crucial in a sport that just demands so much of you when you're on the court.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, Tommy, listen, Tommy does a great job with that, with work-life balance. He gets his work done. He knows what's required. I think, myself, Hugo Armando, who helps us out when Tommy's in Florida and I'm not there, Franco Herrero, who's his strength and conditioning coach. Everybody pushes Tommy pretty dang hard. And Tommy, to his credit, lets everybody push him hard because he knows he needs it. But Franco, his strength and conditioning coach, is also, the first mate on his boat. He's the first guy to be out there fishing with him. So Franco does a good job making sure that Tommy gets his work done, but then they can get out and get on the boat and do what they need to do. So it works really well from that standpoint.
Yeah, there's definitely time to unwind, and we know how stressful the sport can be. So it's good to see that you guys are having fun in addition to that. And also, I was going to ask you too. It was last year, but it was in the U.S. Open. It was that epic match. He comes back against Roman Safiullin from 2 sets down. Epic crowd, everything. But I want to know if we're ever going to get the full footage of you mic'd up. Probably not, based on some of the language.
I'm a little. On the one hand, I'm happy about it, and on the other hand, I'm a little disappointed that footage never came out because, at a point, I was mic'd up for the Netflix. You can talk to the Netflix people; they have to have it somewhere. What's funny? After the match, the Netflix guys came to me and they said that was the most honest, real footage that we got, because I, at a point, literally forgot about the fact that I was mic'd up because Tommy was down 2 sets to love, and I was going off. I was screaming. I was dropping F-bombs left and right. I was turning around and screaming at some of the people within our group that they needed to get louder, I mean, I was going bananas, to be honest with you, like during that whole match, coaching a lot of stuff, and then the thing comes out on Netflix and they didn't use any of it. They didn't use any of it at all. I was like, what the heck? Didn't make any sense. So somewhere that's archived, and like like I said, on the one hand, I kind of want to see it. On the other hand, I'm kind of glad that it didn't necessarily come out.
Well, somewhere deep in the crevices, hopefully we can get like the full version at some point. But no, it was a great comeback, and it really did spurn a lot of success going forward that Tommy had. Just kind of wrapping it up here, Brad. I know top 10 is a goal, but ATP Finals coming up. Is that on a checklist of a player at this level and a coach at this level to be one of those 8 selected players to get to the final tournament?
Of course it is. And it's funny because we've been in the hunt the last 2 years, where mathematically Tommy still had a chance to make it. And so you're going through and these, you go on these last trips, we're in Tokyo, we're in Shanghai, and all of a sudden us and everybody else are all counting points. Everybody's looking at points, and the scenarios, what can we do? And, especially with Tommy, getting sick in Vienna and then losing first round in Paris, everything was taken out of our hands. And we're looking at all the other scenarios. And we were at a point where, Tommy wasn't going to make top 8. Like, we knew that. We wanted him to finish top 10. But then at the same time, even now, with Novak pulling out of the finals, that moved Tommy up to an alternate position. He was second alternate. And then Tommy was trying to find out if Tsitsipas was going to go as the first alternate, because if he wasn't, then Tommy was going to go as first alternate. He's not going to go, I don't think, as second alternate. The first alternate gets in quite a bit, and all of a sudden there was another scenario for him to be able to make top 10. If he had gone as an alternate and got in, played a match and won, he could have still made top 10. So it was like, man, there's this carrot being held out in front of you again, And I talked to him the other day. I was like, well, listen, if Tsitsipas decides not to go, and you're going to go as first alternate and you want me to go, all you got to do is just give me the call and let me know, we'll be there together. So, but then in the end, I think Stefanos is going to go. So but yeah, I don't think in the end, that's always in the back of your mind until we're at a point where we're 9 or 10 going into the last 3, 4, 5 weeks. We're more worried about trying to get Tommy into the top 10, whether that's 9 or 10. That'll put him in a position where he's battling for the top 8, and then ATP Finals becomes a real part of what you could potentially do.
Yeah, it's cool too from the coaching perspective. You don't ask for much, just a little progress every year. Just be a little bit better every year, a career year. Well, it's been great catching up with you. I know that the final thing I just wanted to go over with you too is that all these players, and Tommy's a great example of it, they have different timelines and trajectories. There's no one path or one ascent. Some get to the top early, as you experienced with Jim Courier and certain things. Some even younger than him. Others take some time to develop, but it's cool to see the path and the ascent at any stage. Tommy hitting 26, 27. I feel like some prime years are coming up, so it's got to be an exciting time watching his path and his takeoff.
Yeah, absolutely. Tommy told me, and I didn't realize this, but Tommy told me that Taylor Fritz was the oldest first-time Grand Slam finalist in the history of tennis. And so I'm looking at Tommy and I'm saying, okay, well, let's be the oldest first-time Grand Slam winner in the history of tennis. If you win at 27 or you win at 28 or you win at 29, it doesn't matter. That's just a different story. It, just like you said, it's another path to get to that position. So yeah, we're excited. We're excited for the future. The way the game has been going, a lot of guys are peaking, somewhere between 27 and 35 now. So we feel like Tommy's got a lot of time left, and we just keep trying to get better.
That's the name of the game. Brad Stine, he's coached for several decades. He's worked with some of the best. His work now with Tommy Paul is exceptional. To watch the American take off with you at the helm has been exciting. Thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Insight, and always fun to catch up. And you made the technology work. You have more advancement than a hedgehog, as you said earlier. But thanks so much, Brad Stine, for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate it.